This was our third preseason match under Roberto De Zerbi, and we still remain undefeated with a 1-1 draw to Sydney FC, but we did win on penalties after. Now, this was a match where we saw Tel score a stunning free kick. We also saw Robertson make his debut for Spurs, and Luca Williams-Barnett scored a nice, cheeky little Panenka in the penalty shootout. So in this video, I'm going to be going into detail about the tactics and the setup by Roberto De Zerbi and how things changed with the substitutes. As well as that, we're going to be discussing the players that I believe were wins and losses in this game. So without further ado, let's get straight to the tactics board, and this is how we set up in the first match, and it's one thing that I think is really worth pointing out, and that was that he gave Archie Gray the armband again today. I know we discussed it in my previous video. If that's something you haven't seen already, then please make sure to go check that out after this one. I'll make sure the link is in the description below. But yes, Archie Gray was captain this time, and it made more sense last time because we had quite a young team, but we still had older players like Ben Davies, who usually captains Spurs when there's no other options. Dubravka's obviously an older player, even Gallagher, Richarlison. We had options there, but no, he gave Gray the armband. And I think that's a real positive sign, because I think it's almost like a test for him to see, all right, you are able to lead players your age, but how can you handle leading players that are a bit more experienced than you and probably have been around a bit longer than you as well, in the likes of Ben Davies. So I think that was a real positive sign. It was also worth mentioning that there was no Matheus Fernandes and there was no Van der Ven, Van Hecker, no Mikey Moore in the squad whatsoever. I think a lot of people blew it out of proportion on social media yesterday, thinking, oh, Fernandes must have torn his ACL, he's injured, this, that and the other, which just wasn't the case at all. I think he's being managed with his minutes. But the other thing that's worth noting is Lucas Bergvall started, which is something I don't think any of us would have seen happening. It's heavily linked with a move away to Nottingham Forest, and look, that probably could still happen. Remember, Bale played in pre-season, Kane played in pre-season before they moved away, and that kind of felt like that in this match. But to talk about the setup, it's very similar to what we've seen in other matches, but actually in build-up, which I found really interesting, is Bergvall was almost taking up this Tonali role, or even the Panenka role, do you want to call it, because it was like that at the end of last season, where actually in possession, when we're building up further from the back, we notice that Hall actually goes sort of inverts forward. Bergvall drops almost to as like a right centre-back, so to speak, and Kieran also joins the attack, and it kind of looks something like this with Gray sitting in front of the three, and this was basically how we would build up, and it's something that Tonali has done at AC Milan. I thought this, and I think Kish said this as well on Twitter, and I believed it too, I thought this sort of style was maybe a bit of a one-off with Panenka, just to play to his strengths, but he seems to be making it an actual real tactic and real build-up plan for Spurs, where obviously you can see you've got one fullback driving centrally this way, you've got the other fullback driving centrally that way to almost help the midfield out with Gray, but then you've got Lucas Bergvall dropping into that right centre-back role. And it wasn't just that, sometimes you'd see him sort of pick up the ball in the middle as well, and have the ball there with Gray sort of in front of him, kind of creating an angle maybe like this, so that we can kind of pop it off to these two like that, or maybe back even to Hardy and build up this way. Either way, what we saw more often than not was Bergvall was actually the one that was kind of dropping when the ball was deeper in kind of our own third, and that's something I want to discuss as well, because the way the centre mids are used is completely varied depending on how high up the pitch we are. When we're in deeper positions like this, Bergvall tended to drop into the sort of like a right back role, right centre back role, so to speak, but as we progressed further and further up the pitch, you saw him sort of go back more into midfield. And actually what we saw, there was one moment in that first half where we were actually attacking really high and really aggressively, and the players that were the highest up in the pitch were the fullbacks. It was so reminiscent of Ange and Ange ball, where I think like Hall was in the middle and had a chance, Kieran came through, he had a couple shots in the first half actually, and I think he looked great again for such a young player who's more naturally a number 8. He had a couple of shots which obviously weren't amazing, they were saved by the keeper, but we saw these two so high up, and it just meant that we had this really aggressive team. Like, let's say the ball was in this sort of area, I think like Tel had it, Kieran was sort of attacking to shoot, Hall was already in the area with Richarlison for some reason. Like, we were going very aggressive, and this is effectively kind of what it looked like, which is a lot similar to our time with Ange. Now on to the next positive, and that was Tel. Again, for me, probably another standout player, where let's just put an opposition in this time. And I said this in the last video, and I've been really pleased with him and that he's doing this more, and I get it. And this, I have to mention this every video. It's pre-season against a poor opposition in comparison to the Premier League. I totally understand that. But what you can sort of draw from was that if it's just as easy as saying it's a terrible opposition, then surely every forward, like a Richarlison who's an experienced number 9, should stand out. But no, for me, it was the one that Tel constantly stood out, because whenever he was on the ball, he was attempting to take players on, again going round, but equally was going inside and either laying it off inwards or even attacking the box himself with a couple of shots. And of course, scored an unbelievable free kick. It was just the placement, and even with a bit of power as well, but the placement itself just bent all the way into the top right corner, and the keeper did not stand a chance. That put us 1-0 up, and I think he deserved the goal, because for me, like I said, first half, standout player. But one person I want to highlight is Conor Gallagher. Now, Conor Gallagher was in this 10 position, and this is why I have a bit of an issue with Gallagher in general. We have a number 10 here whose best football is basically crashing the box and pressing. And pressing he was very good at in this game. He won the ball back loads. But what I will say, there was a few times where he was in the box here, kind of near the penalty spot, alone twice, and the shot was poor. I mean, really poor, with barely any pressure, which was not great. And it kind of looked like a very pre-season effort, you know, when the legs are just not quite feeling right. So I'm not going to make full judgments just yet. Like I said, it's pre-season. But when I look at the players that were performing well, like Gray, I thought was good again. Tel, great. I think Solomon did fairly well taking players on, a little bit quieter than the last match. But Gallagher, for me, as much as he was doing really well at winning the ball high up the pitch, his end product and his passing was, I think, really poor. There was another moment actually where the keeper cocked up. The keeper had the ball here, and he passed the ball inwards, lost it. Gallagher picked it up, and I'd say he's actually kind of this far out. So it was an open goal. He was under pressure a little bit by an opposition player. Like, they were sort of tussling a little bit, and the pitch wasn't great. So I'll give some little benefit of the doubt. But when you've got an open net like that, I'm not being funny, you should be able to at least get it near on target, but he absolutely skied it over, which again was pretty poor. Second half, and we made a couple of changes. You can see that Davis went off for Kota Takai, Tonali was on for Lucas Bergvall, and Luca Williams-Barnett came on for Tel. We made 3 changes at half time. The setup was pretty similar. The only thing I'll notice is that at times, actually, we kind of went back to this 4-1-4-1 that we saw in the last match, where Gray was sort of by himself and Gallagher and Tonali was sort of more like this. But what I will say is, again, it really depended on what part of the pitch we were at. When we were sort of in the middle third / more the attacking third, Tonali had the license to be more aggressive. But what I will say is sometimes when the ball was a lot deeper, and Tonali would almost become the left centre-back in a back 3, and this allowed Hall to go forward a bit more. The rotations were key. I think that's got to be something we've got to watch out for in the future. When Tonali's pressing high, you'd see Gallagher drop off a little bit, but also Hall would support Gray to sort of form 2 in the middle. But if we were much deeper in the pitch, Tonali would be further back. A few things to note that happened in this half. Luca Williams-Barnett hit the crossbar. I think he is such a silky player and someone I want to hone in on. I think even though he was sort of playing on the left wing this time, which is sort of what Mikey Moore was usually doing, what I liked about him whenever he had the ball is he just looks comfortable. There were moments where he turned players, he was driving into the box really well, driving centrally. He's just a tidy player and a real joy to watch. So it was interesting seeing him on the left wing in this game. Now, I just want to talk about the goal that we conceded. It was in like the 54th minute, and it was we lost the ball in midfield. Basically, the midfielders didn't do well enough to win the ball back, and it just allowed the Sydney FC player to kind of drive forward in this position. And I don't think Takai had the best game compared to the previous 2 that we saw, but I think this bit is just really unfortunate. The ball was played through the middle, and it was going to go make its way through to this attacker you can see here. Takai had to intercept the pass. If he left it, then that player could have easily been one-on-one for an effort. He sticks his leg out, and just really unfortunately, it falls all the way here, perfectly to the other Sydney FC attacker, who kind of just easily has a shot to make it 1-1. So it was an unfortunate interception. I don't want to bash Takai too much about it. I think it's one of those ones he had to do his job. It's just unlucky. But yeah, annoying to concede that goal is what it is. Now we get to about the 64th minute mark, and load more changes happen. So the team ends up looking actually something like this. Now, what I really want to hone in on with these changes in this part was how we changed the fullback role. I think previously with Kyrie Madsen, let's just say he was left back, this is earlier in the match, more often than not, he would like drive centrally and kind of attack the box. And we saw that especially in the first half with Tel. Like I said, he had a couple of shots in the first half, not the best shots, but he was still getting in these sort of positions and driving centrally. I think what changed a lot with Robertson coming on is you saw a tendency more to overlap and put crosses into the box, which is obviously Robertson's strength, right? We know that from his time at Liverpool. And in fact, he created 2 brilliant chances for Yang. One of them was he was sort of in this position, and these are just rough positions for the rest of the players, but he put a nice ball across here. I think he might have took a deflection pretty early on, but you had plenty of time for Yang to basically tap it at the back post, and he completely mishits it and it goes wide. I think Yang did not have a great game coming on, and it worries me that I think a lot of the other youngsters just looked way more comfortable. Yang just looked busy, looked like he was trying to move at 100 miles an hour. Didn't really work. But the second Robertson moment was more of a lofted cross into the box, and Yang had a header. Now, he's a very small player, so I'm not expecting him to get headers, but he was under no pressure from anyone else. Zero pressure. You would at least like to get him on target. I know it's not his best attribute, so he might not necessarily score all the time, but he has to get on target. Unfortunately, he heads it over the bar, which was really disappointing. So like I said, I don't think he had a great game for me personally when he came on. Not that impressive. But this is more just to highlight how we use Robertson differently to maybe an Udogie or Kieran Matton, or maybe even Jed Spence if he's to stay and play left back as well. You're going to see a lot more crosses from Robertson into the box. Then begs the question, if we do sign a new striker, which I say we should sign a new striker, they probably need to be good in the air, because when you look at the whole squad, we don't really have players that are good in the air. I think Solanke is definitely better than what we have, but he was missing from today's squad and obviously not had the best start to his time at Spurs. I think it's something we definitely need to look to in the transfer market if we want to utilise Robertson's strength the best. And the other thing I quickly want to say as well is you just forget that Luca Williams-Barnett is 17 years old. Like, his technical ability on the ball, like I said a minute ago, is it's just so good for such a young player. Is such a bright spark and someone I look forward to seeing more in a Spurs shirt. Another bright spark for me was Jamie Donley. Now, Jamie Donley has changed at Spurs. I mentioned it in the last video. He started off in the academy as a number 9. Then he sort of dropped to be a bit more of a number 10. And I think that's where he played when he was like on loan to Stoke. Well, when he did play, that is. But now he's actually sort of taking up this sort of number 6, 8 role. And in fact, similar to what we were saying about Gray before, Donley was sort of the one that you would argue was a bit deeper and allowed Tonali to be a little bit more aggressive and on the front foot. Although I'd say more often than not now to close off the game, they were sort of closer to each other in the sort of centre mids and the usual sort of 4-2-3-1. But Donley, the reason why I like him sort of a bit further back now is I think if I was to put like a negative towards him, I think he's not quite nimble enough to be a number 10 in tight situations. You can see the difference between him and Luca Williams-Barnett. You can really see the difference in how they move their body. But what I like about in these deeper positions is that he's still really comfortable on the ball. He's really great at passing the ball forward. Even when the opposition had the ball in kind of attacking us in this sort of area, the way that he would receive the ball when we won the ball back and just calmly play it off, receive, play it forward. That's what I like about him. You can definitely tell he's matured a bit now. He's 21 years old. Maybe that's something to keep an eye on. Is that someone that we want to stick around, especially if we do sell Sarr, do sell Lucas Bergvall, maybe even sell Bentancur? Could we have Donley as the 4th choice centre mid? I don't know. That's something to work out for Zerbi and maybe later on against better opposition in pre-season and into the start of the season. Who knows? Nonetheless, really impressed me when he came on. So the match finished 1-1. It went to penalties because I think they called it like the Super Cup or something. So I think there was technically something on the line, you know, these preseason sort of trophies. And Luca Williams-Barnett was the first one up, and he did a lovely cheeky Panenka. And yeah, I think what a way to sort of show your abilities off a little bit. And then Scarlett wins the penalty shootout just to see off the match. But all in all, that's the main takeaways, like I said, throughout this match that I liked was Robertson's debut was used differently to the other fullbacks, which was really interesting. Luca Williams-Barnett looks so technically gifted and someone I definitely want to keep an eye on for the rest of pre-season. Same with Donley, that is, for that matter. And Tel. What can I say about Tel? Another great game from him, scoring a fantastic free kick. But if you want to see what he was like in the previous match against Auckland, make sure to click this video right here. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please make sure to like and subscribe. We'll be breaking down the Chelsea video this weekend and hopefully look forward to some positive Savinho news. I look forward to seeing you guys in that video.